Alright, hello, this is Goof Shoes. I'm one of the reviewers in the Stylus Map Discord. I'm going to be covering a submitted map from a very active member named Poodros. This is a revamp of a long-running map of his called Stylia Resonance, although he's submitting it as Cubane. So that's a little... I'm not quite sure of the details of that. So what Poodros has noted for this review for us, the reviewers to consider, is the spawns aren't definitive. Obviously this map is in a blocking phase yet. Not all the buildings are finished, and there's a key, more or less, to tell which ones are and aren't going to be accessible. And that there's no cover yet, which is pretty obvious because this is empty. So right off the bat, there's some issues just with the general layout. I'll just get at them. So first off is objective placement. So to understand the issues with the objective placement, you have to know the spawns. You have ghost spawns are basically all compressed into this building for now, and there's a big fucking issue with that I'll get to in a second. And then all the phantom spawns are compressed into that building there. Oh, and man, this white neon on the edges is like hurting my eyes to look at. So let's not do that. For anyone else that's watching this, or for Poodros, please don't put bright ass neon on the edges of your maps. I mean, I'm doing this review at like 4 o'clock in the morning anyway, so it's not the best time for you to have bright ass lights anyways. So with the spawn placement being understood as there and there, you can then look at the issues with objectives. We can see that the hill is more or less centered. This hill location, actually, depending on where the exits and entrances to all these buildings are, probably wouldn't be that bad. The biggest issue with it would be these balconies and windows here overlooking it. Look at that neon, dude. Look at that shit. Right there is another balcony. I assume this building would probably have some windows once it's built, considering that the use of windows on this map is very ample and not in a very responsible way. So as far as placing a hill in a objective B in the center of a map, that's that's standard fare, really. There's no problem with that idea in and of itself, and considering the diagonal line from spawns, that's a pretty good idea. The other two flares, however, are issues, because Ghost has a massive advantage getting to either flare. Because Phantoms has to run this really long diagonal sprint through a whole lot of fucking nothing to get there. There's going to be these buildings, which would probably overlook those areas, and that would be a problem. And that means that Phantoms are going to have a really hard time getting to Objective C, whereas Ghosts only have this one straight run, even just up through a building here, into Objective A, what I assume would be A. So Ghosts have a really easy time getting to the two tertiary objectives. Now, granted, Ghosts have this slope right here, which means they kind of have to play a little weird game trying not to get fully exposed to the hill if they want to get over to C, or A rather, but I don't... that spells issues for me. I'm not sure how I feel about that. So objective placement is a little bit of an issue. I would try to set it to something more diagonal. Move this over here, adjust the map a little bit to accommodate, and then that objective has some layout issues as well. So I mentioned this problem versus ghost spawns, so unfortunately, since spawns aren't definitive, I really can't give a definitive assertion on what the issues with spawns may or may not be, because these aren't the end product. Basically, you have ghost spawn in this depressed little region here, in this building. And I really don't know where else I would spread them out, because there's an objective right fucking here. You could stick them like in the corner of this building, but phantom spawns are right there. You know, it'd be really close, so it would be hard to spread out ghost spawns anymore. Maybe in that like corner building right there, which will be accessible, by the way. Just so people understand how the buildings work on this, if you see this red here, they're inaccessible. These three don't have that red half-roof situation, so these will be accessible, at least to my understanding, unless Poodros made a mistake. But I don't think he would. Poodros is typically relatively thorough. And these three buildings will also be accessible in some capacity, but they don't have a layout yet. So, ghosts come out of this building, and there's this whole complex, along with this building here, overlook, and this ledge, and I mean fucking point B, really, overlooking their spawn area. Ghost spawns on this map are fucked. They're really, really bad. So there's a couple design lessons to learn from these. Number one is don't put white neon on the corner of your maps, please. It makes the windows horrible to look through. Two, having really wide open windows in balconies and shit like this, ledges, really, they give a huge advantage to people peeking from them. And depending on, you can use that to your advantage if you're careful with it. But if you're not, which is the case with this map, you end up with this situation where ghosts have to push up against this whole building, which has this entire window here to peek from. You have this whole space that you can pop up from. You have this ledge, which I assume would likely end up having some cover through there, which you can end up peeking behind or standing on top of. You have this whole balcony. That's a really big space to peek from, too. And there's a bunch of entrances into all of those areas, and also this section, too. It's just when you have a really open set of windows or balconies, it's a ton of space for someone pushing towards that to try to take in when they're moving in that direction. And it means that people peeking from it have a huge advantage. Which I basically just already reiterated. You can see this issue on Zavad by far most prominently, in that the edges of the factories, you really can't predict where someone's going to peek from. If you've played for a really long time, if you're pushing rank like 180 and above, or even into the 200s, I'm sitting at like I think my cumulative rank is like 260 or some tragic shit. And at that point, you can start to know the general vague areas that someone might peek from. They're generally going to pop out more towards like a ladder because they were just sitting there anyway. They just got up, or they might be closer to one of the pipes on the map. But it's only a vague impression, really. There's no rule to it. I'm sure a really fucking good competitive player might know those better than myself, but I digress. So you have a very similar issue right here, overlooking the only reasonable spawn area for the map. So that's a really big issue. Ghosts would be at a serious disadvantage on this map, really, no matter how much cover you put here, because they have to stay behind it, otherwise they'll die. Additionally, looks like that building is also accessible there, but I mean, looks like that's just connected to this complex here. So to get to the layout of more specific buildings, since that's really what would be easiest to cover here, a lot of buildings are built like this, with this kind of room layout. That primarily being that it's one lane through a building with a single staircase and a bunch of fucking corners. And that's just boring, frustrating gameplay, because you're running through these ridiculous choke points if you want to get anywhere. I mean, look at this. This building is rough. got just corners and hallways. Ghost trying to push through here. You're fucked. You're fucked. You're fucked. You have 3 angles to try to cover as soon as you enter. And you're like, if someone's just sitting there waiting for you, they'll have the jump on you and you'll be dead. Unless they're more like the average Phantom Forces player, in which case they're sometimes their heart forgets to beat, let alone actually shoot someone. So, a room like this is an issue too. What I would look into doing is trying to connect this whole string together somehow, and just divide it up with a lot of well-placed cover to produce good sightlines. That way you don't have just nasty choke points like this. You have a more free-flowing, open space that can support multiple kinds of combat, instead of something like this just being shotguns in fucking melee, which is far and away probably one of the most frustrating parts of the game, or at the very least one of the most inconsistent and strange. Not much to say about these buildings because we don't know what's going to be in them yet. So now we can get over to the Phantom Spawn buildings themselves. Please put run tools in your map, or a teleport tool or something, because this is rough. So here's the Phantom Spawn building so far. I assume this road might end up having some spread out Phantom stuff on it. Probably up to like that edge, maybe a little bit closer. Which would obviously need a lot of very well placed cover to keep Phantoms safe when they're spawning and leaving. So the building, it's also, these spiral staircases are just nice. This is a nice little touch. They're cute. They work for whatever reason, because Roblox broke their fucking stairs. These work like perfectly, and it's a mystery to me why that's the case. This room is just a giant room with there's just one exit, and hey, look at that, big ass double windows right here, right out of your spawn room. And you have no other route to take. You can go and drop down, but you'll take fall damage from that. And then you have to run past there and get into here. This is also just a single spawn room. There's nothing else here. It's just a giant room with a single spawn. There's no other routes out of it. So if you're coming out of this building, you gotta go to the second floor and go back out that way. You gotta jump out of the window. If you spawn in those areas anyway. And that's about it. That's not great. You really want to open up your map. This is another one of those really choke pointy rooms. Just a single doorway, single staircase. Up here, you can jump out of these windows or go out onto this little balcony area. And this comes to another important point about map design, which is how to handle snipers in your maps. And basically, sniper lane design in Phantom Forces right now, it's very simple. To put it kindly, it's very simple. And it is that you have a sniping spot. Here is a warehouse, here's a tower. You go in the tower to snipe. That's where snipers go. You have a big 3-story tower, or you have another literally just a sniper tower with nothing else. You have the balcony on the motel, on warehouse, all that kind of shit. And that kind of style goes for just about every map. Mall is basically the only map that doesn't have something like that. And even still, it kind of does. Mall or Rig. Well, no, Rig definitely has some that are very prominently snipers' positions. And what this ends up leading to is that sniper gameplay on Mall is actually pretty rewarding. Because you're not... I don't like to say having your hand held. But more like you're getting removed from the game, basically. You're not part of the regular flow of the map and how it's supposed to be working. You're just kind of, as a sniper, if you're playing the way that Phantom Forces has designed your sniping flow, you're kind of stuck into a corner in a tower, and you're not really doing anything. You're pretty useless. I mean, here, the fucking crane, perfect. There's literally no more precise and clear example of this idea than the crane. Fundamentally useless piece of the map, takes up a shitload of parts, distracts players from the actual flow. And how you want to do snipers is more like Maul. Not quite exact, because Maul is that giant-ass useless parking garage that's basically just for snipers to be useless on. And again, I'm not saying that snipers are inherently useless, it's the way Phantom Forces has designed around them that has made them very irrelevant, unless you're playing as an aggressive sniper with something like an L15 or an intervention that have colossal torso one-hit kill ranges, or are just generally fast snipers, maybe more something like the Mosin. So applying that newly found knowledge to this, here's what we find, is that this map is loaded with sniper spots. With the place where snipers go and be useless. If you look, you can sort of see the hill from here, and you can see the exit from it, and that's a good thing. You want a sniper to be able to watch an objective itself, or the way out of it. Important ones. The problem is that it's done really loosely and it's just sloppy. It's not well designed. You have this giant room with a bunch of windows, and you just sit up here. You go prone when you don't want to get shot, then you walk back out from this whole, again, this Zavad kind of ledge idea. Get a shot, and you go back, and that's about it. You, as a sniper, are removed from the actual gameplay. What you want to do with snipers would be something like maybe board up these two things and have this be wide open. You break this edge here, and instead if you're peeking as a sniper, it's a very aggressive peek. Now this still isn't optimal, I'm just going with this map. What you really want to do with snipers is build it completely into the map without pulling them out of it. You want to have something like one main long sight line right here, up through this avenue, and then kind of like tightly designed cover around it, so that you can take a shotgun or a PDW or an assault rifle and flank up through the side, while a sniper can still sit here and peek this lane. He has a tight little window of oh fuck, I can't think. Like it's not, I guess, field of view, really, cone of view that he can manage. But he's putting himself at risk from an aggressive flanker. Just remember that a well-designed sniping position is very powerful. You can easily choke down a really valuable exit or objective on a map, or just lane in general, with super fast, really precise one-hit kills, just right after another, with a sniper rifle. And depending on the sniper you choose, depends on the total application, whether you're taking something slower like the Hellcat or something faster like a Mosin. And so there's supposed to be a catch to that, basically, that Phantom Forces doesn't have in a good way. The catch in normal Phantom Forces is you just are static. You don't go anywhere. But the way that's supposed to be done is you're vulnerable. You take a powerful position, but you can get flanked easily. So you have to keep a secondary, stay on edge, move around a little bit. You don't necessarily have to run around constantly, very aggressively, but it's not just sitting static. So that's something that this map could learn from, with open window settings like this. There's many disadvantages to them. They're typically not great design. This one's not really an exception. I already said, vocalized my concerns with the street. We got some phantom spawns in this building too, which helps mitigate that issue of spawning that other one building with its giant spiral staircase window. But you have a phantom spawn here. There's an objective right fucking there. People are going to be right up in your shit over here. Having aggressive, like, flanking spawns isn't a bad thing, but one that's so blunt like these are problematic. more wide open windows over an objective or an important area. It's not great. Really, the thing is that no good amount of smart cover can mitigate the issue from having so many peeking angles. It helps, but it doesn't remove the problem, and you really want to remove problems. So let's get into this objective's layout. It's got some issues, primarily being this corner. It's the same issues basically that the rest of the map follows with its interiors. They're very choky. You have one doorway, one staircase, one doorway. This one has two, which is a little bit uncommon. You get this super tight, really dangerous objective to try to capture, because you have shotguns just sitting right up here, or in these corners, and if you're trying to stay safe or get out of the way, you get shot. You don't really have anywhere to go. You have to push this with a shotgun, and locking players into a certain play style to try to be relevant to an objective isn't really a great idea. Another fucking window situation here. Balcony, same problem. And a extremely tight interior here with a completely useless room. This room doesn't do anything. Staircase. Basically, it's really good that this map is blocked out, because that means all these major issues can be fixed with relative ease. This is why you block your maps, kids, folks. Fucking Robloxians. I don't know if that even gets said anymore. Your maps aren't going to turn out great on their first or second or third iteration. Nobody really gets it right on the first try. Even working on the Dunes revamp, I bounced off some layout ideas with Shay, back and forth a little bit, refined the map. It was pretty close to good on its first try, but as we've been going, we've noticed more and more issues and had to fix them. Blocking out your maps means you can fix them. Now, they're not impossible to fix if your map isn't blocked, but it's going to take a lot more fucking time, and that sucks. If you don't... It's not a fun time if you find out, oh shit, my map's too big, and you have to try to scale it all down. That's not a great time. Especially with all your props that are now fucked up. You really need to be careful. So, without, just to not... I've basically sat here and tore into this map for 20 minutes, and sometimes that's just how it goes. Not every map is a winner, and that's not necessarily the fault or to the detriment of the person that created it. I guess it is their fault, but it's not. It's the reaction to that news that determines someone's merit. So this one is salvageable. As far as broke-ass maps go, there's been far worse that either myself have reviewed or I've seen other reviewers cover. This one is perfectly fixable. It's very flawed, but it's fixable. Restricting the really loose verticality and roof access and windows, fixing up the spawns, fixing up the objectives, making the buildings flow more easily, have a much better design instead of so tight and choky. If all of that's done, which would be a very large sum of work, even in a blocking stage, since it would be a very thorough redesign of the finer details of the map, this could probably be a pretty good map. I mean, as long as this road is covered up properly, this spawn won't be an issue. If this ghost area is handled properly, they can spawn a little bit nicer over spread out. If the objectives are more in a nice diagonal direction, that would work better. If the hill is less vulnerable to all these various windows, you've got a good map sitting here. The question is it worth taking a layout that's so broken in all these ways to try to fix it? This one, yes, because the fixes themselves are a little bit tedious, but they're not monumental. They're not ridiculous amounts of work. It would just take some careful sightline planning to make sure that it all works nicely. So the flow is problematic. The spawns are very problematic, even in their unrefined state. Just trying to imagine where else they could be, there isn't really a lot of room to stick them anywhere else, and even if you did spread them out, it still wouldn't fix a lot of issues. So yeah, here's Cubane / Stylia Residence revamp by our friend Poodros. I'm Goof Shoes. Thank you for watching.